Um, yeah, so
Okay.
that I can kind of also kind of ask my parents one last time just to kind of go over it and kind of just, discuss with them and then I can tell you by the next class.
Yeah, of course, take your time. That's absolutely fine. Do
Okay,
the
perfect.
research that you need to do.
Okay.
No worries. Mhm. Okay.
Do you mind just giving me a second? I'll just get my pencil real quick.
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
Okay, back. Thank you.
No problem. I'm just going to share the anthology on the screen. Right, so this is the anthology, the poetry anthology. Do you want to start off with the first poem in the list, or do you want to choose at random?
Yeah, we can start off with the first poem if
Yeah, perfect. Have you ever read it before?
yes.
Have you annotated it?
Not in depth. Not really. Not annotated it, no.
Okay, right. I'm just going to get a copy of it. Do you have a printed anthology of this?
I will be getting it printed today.
Okay, okay, perfect. It's always good to have a physical copy.
Yes.
Mm. I'm just trying to get a full picture of it. Right. Okay, I'm sending this to you in the chat as well, so you can kind of save a digital copy.
Sure.
And I'm just going to give you around a few minutes to read it and refresh your memory on what you had done before. Once you're done reading, let me know.
Sure. Okay, I'm done.
All right, perfect. So how we're going to start off is I'm going to give you a few minutes for you to tackle the poem by yourself. See what you can annotate, what you can do without my assistance. That will also help give me an idea of how much you're able to do by your own and where I need to give you a push. And once you feel like you cannot find any more devices or any more techniques, I'll step in and we will go through the whole poem from top to bottom. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good. But the thing is, I don't know any like techniques that I can point out because I'm not familiar with them. Like I don't know any like specific things like, I'm not aware of them to be very honest, not even the basics right now.
Okay, so you haven't done any techniques like similes, metaphors, any of that before?
I know a few of them, but not I'm honestly if I'm speaking, I only know like enjambment, what's it called? What's it called? Metaphors, similes, but
Hmm.
I'm not aware of the rest of them. No.
Okay, no problem. It's okay. We can go through a refresher before we work on the poem.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So I have previous notes, so I'm just going to walk you through those to give you a general idea of what poems are like. Is this the first time you're ever doing poems in such depth?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. So key terms that we look at when it comes to poems is rhyme. Okay. Rhyme refers to a repeated sound at the end of the line. For example, run, sun, dog, fog. That's something that's pretty common in most poems. I wouldn't say all poems because not all poems have rhyme schemes, but
Yeah.
rhyme is something that kind of gives the poem that song-like feeling, that
Okay.
fluent feeling. So I would say majority poems do have rhyme schemes. Majority, some of them don't. So just any kind of repeated sounds at the end of the line, and this is how we mark them. So any similar sound or the first similar sound is always annotated with the alphabet A, and the second sound is annotated with an alphabet B and then C. So we just go like down the line of A, B, C, D. Obviously, we
Okay.
don't get through to Z. I think the most we ever use is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, maybe. We
Yeah.
don't make it past that quite often.
Okay.
Um, After the rhyme scheme, we come to meter. Now, meter is something that we have to discuss in depth later on as well, because it has submeters. So meter is just like an overall rhythmic structure, how many number of syllables there are in a line. And what we mean by syllables is the sounds that we pronounce, the vowel
Okay.
sounds that we pronounce, okay? So with meter, we have a lot of meters. We have iambic meters, we have iambic tetrameter, we have iambic pentameter, that say whether there's three syllabic sounds or there's five syllable sounds or there's six. We have a name for each one of those different
Okay.
meters. So that is something that we can always kind of come back to and have a more in-depth discussion. Um, we have the form of the poems as well. Now, form of poem is usually referring to the overall structure. Like what type of poem is it? Um, that's always based on the number of lines or the number of stanzas in a poem. It is measured even using the rhyme scheme. So the form is something more generic to the overall idea. For example, any poem that has no rhyme scheme is referred to as a free verse poem.
Okay.
And then we have other poems or other forms like a sonnet. Sonnet is usually a 14-line poem centering around the themes of love. Not always, but generally. We have elegies, which are usually a funeral or poems dedicated to the dead. Um, we have ballads, which are like a romantic musical form of a poem, which is always very emotional. We have what do you call it? Haikus, which are short Japanese poems. We have limericks, villanelles, and so forth, epics, and we have like a list of them. Again, I have further broken down them have broken them down for you a little bit below. So good so far? Or
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right. So we have stanzas. Now in poems, each paragraph is referred to as a stanza. In text, in prose, in compositions, comprehensions, we refer to those as paragraphs. In poems, we refer to them as stanzas. And each sentence is referred to as a line. So we have specific terminology in poems, stanzas for paragraphs, lines for sentences.
Okay.
And that's what we will be using throughout our annotations, throughout our answers. Whenever we want to refer to something, we will say stanza 1, stanza 2, line 5, and so forth. We do not use paragraphs or sentence. Now,
Okay.
types of poems can also be the themes, but types of poems is usually referring to the form that I addressed ahead a little bit before. But it can also be considered a theme because it's what brings us to the theme of the poem. It's what centers the poem or gives us a general idea of what the poem is about. Now, the first types of poems is acrostic poems. Acrostic poems are poems that we have learned like in high school. They're not poems that are quite common in today's world or in the poems that we will do more extensively, but have been something that you might have come across back in high school. Let me know if I'm going too fast for you, okay?
Okay.
Right. So acrostic poems refer to the lines being arranged in a way that each first letter of each line would spell out a word. For example, the bottom poem, which says perfect tool for writing, evolution from quills, no touchscreen or keyboard, the first letter of each line is P-E-N, which spells out pen. So that's what acrostic poems are. They always have this secret message that has to be decoded from the first letter of each line. Okay?
Okay. Got it.
Are you familiar with Taylor Swift?
Yes.
She writes a lot of acrostic songs.
Okay. Got it.
Her fans are always looking for these Easter eggs, as they call it, hinting that her lyrics are penned down in a way that they're acrostic, and they're always hinting to either her song or her, relationships or something or the other. Not all of her songs, but some of her songs have taken off an acrostic um, turn. I'll try and find an example for you so that it's more in depth than the one I have here, which is pretty basic.
Sure.
Yeah, but the next one we have are ballads. So ballads, like I said earlier, are narrative poems. They're always telling a story. They have a very melodious song-like feel, but are very, very emotional, very, very, very deep. I think one of our poems in our list, our anthology, Dame le Son Messie, is a ballad. So
Okay.
we will get a good idea of what ballads are like. And ballads have a general rhyme scheme that is common throughout all ballads, which is ABCB, which means the first um, line always ends in one sound, and the second and fourth line always kind of mirror each other, BB, and then we have C. Or
Okay.
we have ABAB. So these are two common rhyme schemes that you will find in a ballad.
Okay.
Now, I'm just giving you general information here. As we go into each poem and we figure out, okay, this is an elegy, we'll discover more about it or
Okay.
more about the ballad, but these are just a little bit of kind of introductions into each type of poems.
Okay.
The next one is an elegy. Elegy is also very common. A lot of poems talking about death, they're reflecting, they're mourning. It's like a letter to your dead loved one. Remember by Christina Rossetti, I think, and two other poems in our anthology are also elegies. So that is also something that we will take a look at. These elegies always end towards the end. The lines are always something of hope, something of redemption, some kind of regret, some kind of change that the main character or the speaker is going through. But elegies are always about losing a loved one, losing a dear one, and you're kind of
Okay.
dedicating this to them.
Okay.
We have epics as the words sound, epic, it's over the top, it's dramatic, it's complex. These are always kind of detailed, fantastical stories. Any kind of poem that has some kind of Greek reference, some historical reference, some out of this world, like not human, almost magical kind of connection, um, is what is known as an epic. It could be something that's based off history, or it could be something completely fictional. But it is always going to be full of emotion, full of drama, over the top, pretty extra. Like the
Okay.
emotions are going to be right there.
Okay.
And then we have free verse. Free verse poems usually are only one stanza, which means it's just like one whole poem written in like one huge stanza. And we don't have any separations. There's no uh, specific rhyme scheme. There's no specific meter. They can be long or they can be short. It's free. There's no
Okay.
specifications that are tying it down. It could be any theme. It could be any particular theme. Haikus are short poems with very strict rules, very strict requirements. They don't have a rhyme scheme, but it is a short poem that's usually maybe 2 lines long. It has to have one line that has 5 syllable sounds, 5 words that have a proper distinctive vowel pronunciation, and it's immediately followed by a 7 syllable line. Haikus are not something that we commonly cover in like literature, but it can be something that you come across in English language or something else where you just need to kind of dissect the meaning, but not something that we need to extremely stress out about with English literature. And
Okay.
now limericks are usually very humorous poems. They're 5 line long. They have a specific rhyme scheme of A A B B A. Again, this has a very specific requirement of the syllable sounds. The first 2 lines have to have minimum of 7 to 10 syllables. Third and fourth line have to have 5 to 7, and the final line again has to have 7 to 10 syllables. Limericks, again, not as common. More common are our free verse poems, sonnets, what do you call it, elegies and ballads. But it's still good to know that limerick can be a possibility, especially for unseen poetry. You may never know what might come. And
Okay.
then we have odes, which are usually songs or poems that are dedicated to some kind of celebration. They also have a very song-like lyrical feel to them. They're very formal, they're full of praises, but overall we can say that they're quite positive.
Okay.
Then we have sonnets. Sonnets are usually love poems. It's not the only thing. Sonnets can also be a little bit about what do you call it? About trust, about hope, um, and so forth. But majorly love.
Okay.
And a major giveaway of sonnet or an identification of sonnet is the sonnet is always 14 lines long. And the last 2 lines are always going to be written separately from the rest of the poem, and those 2 lines are called a couplet. And sonnets are further divided into 2 types. We have Shakespearean um, couplets, which is 3 quatrains. Quatrains refers to a stanza that is made up of 4 lines, and couplet refers to a stanza that is made up of 2 lines. So the
Okay.
first 3 stanzas are going to be 4 lines, totaling to 12, and the last 2 lines, which is a couplet, will bring your sonnet to a 14-line total. So overall, your sonnets are 14-line long. And
Okay.
you have the rhyme scheme for Shakespearean sonnets as A B A B C D C D E F E F G G, which means that each stanza has 2 sets of rhymes.
Okay.
And then we have Petrarchan stanzas, which have 2 stanzas, one which is an octave, an 8-line stanza, and one which is a sestate, which is a 6-line stanza. Again, total lines 14. But if you have 2 stanzas, it's a Petrarchan. If you have 3 stanzas and a couplet, it's a Shakespearean sonnet.
Okay.
The Petrarchan sonnets always have a argument or question in the first 8 lines. A problem has been produced, has been introduced, an argument or a question has been presented, and then when you move on to the 6 line stanza, there is a change of tone, which in poetry we refer to as volta. So whenever we're
Okay.
not answering the question, we can say that there was a switch in volta in line so and so, or there was a switch in volta in the second stanza, which refers to change of tone. And usually it's because the second stanza, which is now 6 line long, is responding to said argument or said question that was presented in the 8 line stanza before.
Okay.
Good so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we come over to a Villanelle. Villanelle is a very obsessive poem, something that is very dark, very rooted in emotion, very intense. It's 19 lines long. It has 5 tercets, 3 line stanzas, and 1 4 line quatrain stanza at the end. It has a very
Sorry, can you give me a second really quick?
yeah, of course, of course.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Take your time.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. It's okay. So, like I was saying, VNLs are very strict with their format. As you can see, the instructions below, line 1 is a repeated line 4 times throughout the entire poem. So line 1, line 6, line 12, and line 18 are the same sentence, literally the same line. And then line 3, line 9, line 15, and line 19 are all the same exact wordings, exact same lines. So that's what makes a VNL so distinct from the rest of the poems, is that the format is quite rigid.
Okay.
Okay. Now these are our basic stanza forms in poetry, as I was referring to a few of those lines above. These are the rest of them. A 1 line stanza is known as a monostich, a 2 line stanza is a couplet, a 3 line stanza is a tercet, and then we have quatrain, quatrain, sestet, septet, octet, or octave as it's commonly known. A 9 line stanza is known as a nonet or a Spenserian, and then we have a dizaine. It's always good for you to know this terminology because it's going to be
Yes.
something that adds to your knowledge, and one of the AOs in your answering, and the examiner will be quite, impressed that you're aware of the terminology. So it's not
Uh-huh.
something that I'm going to say that isn't important, but I'm not going to forcefully make you remember it. It will come with time. As we do the poems, as we address them, as we answer questions, this is something that you will generally get used to referring to, because it's just how we talk in
Yeah.
poetry terms. So it's not something that I'm going to be like, you need to sit and memorize now, 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 but it will come to you over time. And it's always good to know.
Got it.
Yeah. We have types of poetic techniques. Now we have over 50, maybe even over 100 techniques. I have only gone through a few in this particular chart, just a few basics. And as we go across the poems and there's anything that needs to be addressed, or any other device that you need an explanation to, you can always, stop me right there and say that this I do not understand, and this is what I need to go through. So we can always come back to this page, and I can add more of those devices under the ones we already have, and build up this entire file. And then at the end of, the month, or the end of 2 months, whenever we're closer to it, I can share the entire file with you.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have the types of poetic techniques, which is 1, alliteration. We have allusion, we have anaphora, antithesis, assonance, asyndeton, consonance, enjambment, hyperbole, imagery. So I was going in alphabetic order, and I've made it through to imagery. So what I'm going to do is I am going to share this file with you right now on Zoom.
Okay.
And I want you to kind of just go through the notes, just of these devices at the end. Go through them, try to refresh your memory. Let me know which ones are still confusing so we can go through those before we move on to any new ones.
Sure.
Yeah. So I've sent it to you in the Zoom chat. It'll take you maybe about
Yeah, I
5 minutes
got it.
to go through them. And you can let me know once you're done.
Sure. Okay, I'm done. Okay, I'm done. Hello?
Perfect. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, my doorbell just rang. There's someone at the door.
No worries.
Yeah. So were the notes clear enough? Was there anything confusing? Is there something you want us to go through?
Yeah, I just had a question about 7, 6, and 5, the
Okay.
types of poetic techniques.
Okay, 7, 6, and 5. Okay, so 5 assonance, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So assonance is something that people confuse a lot with alliteration, okay? But assonance is the repetition of a vowel sound within a sentence. As you can see, I've highlighted all, stage, all, men and women, merely, players. You can see that all of these have either the vowel A that's repeating or the vowel E that's repeating. And
Yeah.
what kind of importance assonance has is that assonance really helps when we talk about the pentameter that we were referring to earlier on. because the meters and pentameters are all about vowel sound repetitions, right? So assonance is creating an internal rhyme scheme. So our major rhyme scheme is the last words of the sentences rhyming or last word of the lines rhyming.
Okay.
Assonance is an internal rhyme scheme that is making the sentence itself or the line itself be very fluent, be very smooth flowing on the tongue,
Okay.
and the purpose of it is just to bring in fluidity, to make the ideas flow better, to make the concepts flow better. There is no, I would say, very contextual or deeper meaning. It's just there for creating a rhythm in the writing.
Okay.
Because
Got
poems
it.
are meant to be a bit, soft and flowy.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we come to a syndeton. Now a syndeton is basically the use of conjunction, the not use of conjunctions, use of commas basically. So when we use conjunctions like and, but, so, for to connect sentences, we
Yes.
avoid that in the technique of a syndeton. And a syndeton is something that we use usually when we're listing concepts in the poem. We want to list one thing after the other. It could be feelings, it could be tasks, it could be anything, but we don't use and, we don't use or, we don't use but, we don't use because. We simply use commas to separate those thoughts.
Okay.
So there's nothing, again, not something I would say a lot complicated in this, but just something that we can note down um, in the listing format. Like somewhere where the writer or the poet could have used it but didn't use it is something where we can highlight it. So it's not like every list where I've listed three things is going to be a syndeton, but anything where it's like an extensive list and I'm like, okay, there could have been a separation here because conjunctions are used to separate things. It doesn't happen. It's most likely intentional.
Okay.
And the reason behind that is because conjunctions slow down the pace. Listing or the use of a syndeton makes the pace of the poem faster. So
Okay.
it's good for poems that are full of suspense, are used to garner the attention of the reader. The poet wants you to continue reading. But if a conjunction comes in, there's a pause, there's a break, it breaks the momentum. We don't want that to happen. We skip the use of conjunctions and we apply a syndeton. So the pace, the rhythm, everything remains constant and it turns out to be a bit more dramatic.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And now consonance is where assonance was the repetition of vowel sounds. Consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds. So any other letter except the alphabet has been repeated consistently throughout a specific line is known as consonance. Consonance can have, again, it's there for rhythm, but consonance is also there for um, creating emphasis on something, especially when we use harsh sounds. Like if we're talking about a war poem, there's going to be a lot of sounds like bombs and bursts and breaks, and we can say that that B sound, that B consonant repetition embodies or expresses or reflects the harsh realities of war because the B sound is very, very strong, it's very harsh, it's very concentrated. It reflects those harsh realities of war. Whereas if you're talking about something smooth and romantic, you're using much softer sounds, like probably an S or, an R or something like that. That's how we cater in consonants into our poems or the use of it. It just makes one, it's there for the sake of making things appealing and attractive. But two, it might be there for emphasis on whatever the line is being talked about because it might require the reader to reread that line and kind of, dissect the meaning of it.
Okay. Got it.
Yep. And if we use specifically only S sounds, it can be categorized as sibilants.
Okay.
So sibilants is just for S.
Got it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No, no questions.
Okay, perfect. So now let's attempt if just for a trial run. Let's see how you can do with a little bit more information now. Even if it's just basic things that you're highlighting,
Okay.
like enjambment or caesura or anything like that, that's okay. Just give it an attempt, see what you can do by yourself, what you're struggling with. It will give you a good idea as well on how much you're confident with, and then we can see where to go on from there.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so you can start working on it and let me know once you're ready to discuss.
Okay. Okay, I got a few.
Okay, walk me through what you have.
So I got anaphora of the word if.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts from every sentence, mostly every sentence in the
Mm-hmm.
poem. So there's a repeating word of if. Uh, it's an octave poem where there are 8 lines and there are 4 stanzas. And I was guessing maybe that this is a Villanelle poem
Okay.
because there's like a fixation of, if you can do this, if you can do that, if you can do this, you'll have the world in your hands and that so on and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I also noticed an antithesis
Mm-hmm.
in stanza two, uh, stanza two, line three, where there's an antithesis of triumph and a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Disaster is, just a catastrophe and everything, and triumph is kind of like a winning or a victory or something like that. um, I also noticed that there's an enjambment in most of the sentences. Like they're not finished sentences, if there's commas or there's sentence starting with and.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a bit of enjambment as well.
Okay.
That's all for you right now.
Okay, okay, perfect. That's not bad. So we have if, which is anaphora, obviously, throughout the poem. Other than if, we have or as well. Okay, right here. We have or again in second stanza. We have or again in stanza 3, 4, and then we have and as well. So all of these are different examples of anaphora that have been sprinkled throughout the poem. We have multiple uses of enjambments. I'm going to highlight those in like green, just kind of give you an idea. Other than enjambment, we also have caesura. Are you familiar with caesura?
I'm not quite sure. I've heard of it, but I'm not quite sure, no.
Okay, no problem. So caesura is basically, so where enjambment kind of cuts off the line or the thought and moves on to the next one, caesura is a break in thought, a pause. So any
Okay.
full stop, any comma, any hyphen, any explanation, all of that counts as caesura
As
generally,
well as semicolons?
as well as
Semicolons, right?
yes, yes, yes. Because
Okay.
those kind of bring pauses into the flow of the poem and they're meant to elicit some kind of thought process. So they're very
Okay.
skillfully placed so that you pause and you think about what has just been mentioned. So even though
Okay.
every comma, full stop, and everything is a pause, not each use of it is going to be considered a caesura. It's just about the ones that are very strategically placed that kind of evoke a thought
Okay.
that would be counted as caesura. So I'm just going to anyways kind of color code them and highlight them here, here. So here are the most prominent ones. I wouldn't say that every semicolon is a caesura, just the ones that really dig deep, but we can say that the hyphens are a very good use of caesura because they add more extensive information to the previous thought, thus um, evoking a whole new thought process or really making you ponder what was stated
Okay.
early
Okay.
on. Okay, so now other than caesura and anaphora and enjambment, now enjambment, caesura, anaphora all come into structural techniques, okay, or structural kind of aspects, not linguistic aspects. Linguistic aspects is now where the similes and metaphors and personification and all of that comes in.
Yes.
So it's always good to kind of have that clarification or that distinction in your mind as well. Now, if is not a VNL, if is just an inspirational poem.
Okay.
Um, what is a VNL is this poem here. Do not go gentle into the good night, the second last
Got
one.
it.
So do not go gentle into good night is a VNL. Remember is an elegy. My last Duchess is an elegy. War photographer and blessing, I think, and prayer before my birth are all war poems.
Yeah.
La Belle Dame sans Merci is a ballad. Sonnet 116 is a sonnet. So I think you'll get quite a variety of poems in this anthology. This is one of the oldest English anthologies. I, in fact, did this when I did my own O levels. I did
Yeah.
the exact same one. So it's been around for years. And the reason being is that it covers majority of the poem types. So that's a good thing. You cover a lot of themes, you cover a lot of forms, a lot of structures. It's quite extensive. And I think it will be a good walkthrough.
Okay.
So let's kind of walk through a brief, just highlight a few more techniques for you. So can you just tell me what you understood from this poem? Just a summarized version of what this poem is about from your perspective.
I think it tells us, well, in this case, he's talking to his son.
Mm-hmm,
You can just see at the end of the last line where he says, "You can be a man, my son."
mm-hmm,
So he's talking to his son, and it kind of tells him, his son, if you can do this, if you can finish all this list of things, then you can become a better man. But in this case, I think he's telling us how we can become a better human.
mm-hmm,
But yeah, I guess it's just a little bit of checklist to tell us how we can succeed in life.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's all.
so even though at the end we understand that it is somewhat of a guidance to his son, it can be taken as a very general advice poem, and anyone who is struggling in life, is struggling through adulthood, through finding themselves, can turn to this poem for guidance because it's quite descriptive, it's quite directive in telling you what you can or should do in life to get by successfully.
Yes.
And that's what this poem centers around, and it's quite appealing to the youth that are struggling or are new into adulthood or new into the adult world. It is a poem that's written in second person narrative. The narrator directly addresses the reader, and it's only until the end of the poem that we realize it was addressed to a son, but
Yes.
it was quite general throughout until the end. It's very positive. It's very motivating. Those are the tones that we can highlight the poem in the poem. And as you mentioned, it is an octave because there's four stanzas, each one of them, which is an 8-line stanza. And it is written in iambic pentameter. So iambic pentameter, let me get you the exact definition. Okay. So iambic pentameter is specifically focusing on 10 syllable sounds per line. So I can
Okay.
copy paste that information for you here. Okay. So iambic pentameter is a rhythmic pattern in poetry which consists of 10 syllables per line. Each pair is called an iamb
Okay.
and so forth. And the reason why I'm giving you this exact text is because it's a lot easier to understand when it's put into words like this. All right. This particular line from Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, it's not the one we'll be covering, but just for an idea. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? The stressed syllables are shall, com, thee, some, and day. And it follows the rhythmic pattern of the dum, the dum, the dum, the dum, the dum. And it is something that is focusing on all of these. Like, if I want to specifically highlight the shall, compare, some, and that's what's referring to the dum, the dum, the dum sound. So it's not, it sounds stupid when you put it like down like that. But when you say it, it's very pronounced, is what we're focusing on. Like
Okay.
it's very stressed, very what we mean by stressed and unstressed is how much pressure you're putting on your mouth, or how your mouth is kind of folding over those words as you're
Okay.
saying them, or how much your like lips touch your lip, like touch each other as you're saying it. Shall, or how your tongue hits the top of the roof. All of that brings into consideration how much stressed or unstressed something is. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? All of that specific effort that comes from you talks about how it's stressed. But if some word just flows out of you very easily, it's known as unstressed.
Okay.
So we have shall I. Shall is our stressed, I is our unstressed. Come is our stressed, air is our unstressed. That's why we have the dum, the dum, the dum rhythmic pattern that has been mentioned at the bottom, where it's followed with one stressed and unstressed, stressed and unstressed, stressed and unstressed syllable.
Got it.
Yeah. It is a bit complicated when you initially start off with it, which is why I put down the exact definition for you, so
Yeah.
that I'm not confusing you. But as you progress through the poems, you will kind of like notice it as you're reading through the poems. You're like, oh, this could be a syllabic line because there's a lot of pronunciation over here.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's something that comes with practice.
Got it.
So, like I was saying, it's an iambic pentameter. We talked about how this poem is about a father that addresses his son and kind of motivates him to have faith in himself. He gives up a lot of secrets on how to become a better human being, how to succeed in life, how to, not give up after struggle. Those are a lot of the advices that a normal father-son duo would share amongst themselves.
Yes.
When we talk about a bit of background history, we see that Rudyard Kipling had taken inspiration from the life of someone by the name of Leander Starr Jameson. He was a British colonial and around the 10th Prime Minister of the Cape Colony back in the year 1895. And he was known for assembling this kind of private army that overthrew the government at that time because they were occupying large parts of South Africa. And they initially were supported by the British government, but when the plan failed, the government backed out, and Jameson was ended up being arrested, and he ended up still staying firm on his beliefs. He did not cower under the pressure of being arrested. He still stuck by his beliefs, and that's why a lot of people say that Rudyard Kipling's inspiration was Jameson Raid and how he stuck through his decisions, stuck through himself, and did not like deter from his goal in life.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So just a little bit of background, and history of poems are very, very easy to get um off any of their, Google pages. Every poem has a historical context. There's always the poet being inspired by someone, or it's always based on the era that it was written in. For example, if something is written in the Elizabethan era, or the Jacobean era, or um, what do you call it, the Edwardian era, it will influence the writing. So that's why we take a look into the historical context as well, because what is happening in the world or in the country at the time that the author wrote this poem reflects into why the poem is about what it is.
Okay.
And personal history as well. That's marriage, illnesses, death, sickness, betrayals, heartbreak. All of that also plays a huge role into poems because poems are like, a love letter on paper. Writing your
Got it.
feelings is like journaling. So we will take a look into historical context of these poems as well, just so that we can briefly address them in our questions. So
Got it.
we are done with class for today, but just giving you an overview of what we're going to go through is we will walk through these poems one by one, and we will dissect them from bottom to end, highlighting the techniques, highlighting the purpose, the authorial intent, the um, tone, mood, atmosphere, everything, historical
Okay.
context. We'll attempt some questions. And when we get to the end of the poems, we will do comparative questions as well, comparing two poems with each other, because those are a common type of questions that
Sure.
come in the papers. So once we're done with these poems, we move on to one of the novels. If you want to have maybe one class for poetry and one for novels a week, we can also have that worked out, and we'll move side by side if you want, or if you want to do poems first and move on to the book, we can do that as well. And then towards the end, when we come to the papers, we can kind of come back and refresh. That's also entirely up to you. You can
Sure.
ponder upon it, and then you can let me know on Friday, and we can work around a timetable.
Perfect. Great.
Right.
Yeah.
Any
Thank
questions
you
so
so much.
far?
No, no questions.
Right. So then I'll see you on Friday.
Perfect. See you then.
See you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
You too.